Blue Star was overrun by monsters. Each person was given the opportunity to awaken their beast symbol and summon monsters. Only the Dragon Empire, having lost its heritage, was subjected to humiliating ridicule from other nations who dubbed it a weakling alliance. Yongyang, who was transferred to this time, began to acquire the strongest sign of the beast. This activated the summoning atlas from the Chronicle of the Mountain and Seas. While others were struggling in the mud, he had already summoned the ancient divine beasts. The divine turtles crushed the mountain ranges. The flames of the sunset dragon could incinerate entire cities. The giant Xintian axe could crush everything in its path. He was not some kind of beast tamer. He was the creator of a new world. He had been in this world for 5 years already. He was happy that that day had finally come. He thought about the stone wish that he had ended up there with him. Everything was done just for the moment ahead. He stood firmly on his feet and was ready for anything. He was full of power and, thanks to the summoning of his beasts, was capable of incredible things. His desire was to awaken the most powerful mark of the beast. 20 minutes before this, the masters had told us that the signs of the animals were divided into ranks from highest to lowest. They were divided into the ordinary, mystical, amber, earthly, heavenly, immortal, and divine ranks. The more light crystals that flashed, the higher the rank of the beast mark. The master asked those he would call to enter the circle of awakening. When the young man's name was called, he immediately came out of the crowd and stood where he was told. The guy waved his hand and shouted that he was ready and they could begin. The crystals that formed the circle in which the young man stood began to light up. It was my young man who got an amber rank with talent E. The guy was surprised how this was even possible. The master called the next participant named Fantong. This young man of mine got an ordinary rank without any talents, which could greatly upset everyone. Fantong cried because of his worries. He couldn't believe that he had actually been given the lowest rank possible. Soon Zhao Chunfeng reached the amber rank and Zhang Huowan reached the ordinary rank. After this, Wang Shukuan received the mystic rank. Soon it was the turn of the Zhou family's eldest daughter named Zhaoing. Everyone knew this girl and also knew what her family was like. The girl thought about Yan Yan. She had been in his shadow for 3 years and felt that everything was about to change. She was going to prove to him who the real genius really was. One of the guys turned to Yongyang and noted that it seemed like the school's top beauty was angry at him again. Yan Yan was very serious and said that he didn't care because he hadn't done anything bad. The guy asked Yongyang what rank he thought he would get. Yan Yan could only imagine that the divine Ralph would receive it, and he didn't even count on any of the niches. He believed that he had to awaken the divine sign and saw no other result. One of the guys nearby noted that Yongyang was apparently really excited about getting such a high rank. One of the guys in the crowd clarified that the theoretical exams were one thing, awakening the mark of the beast was something completely different. The girl standing near Yongyang recalled out loud that there were only 10 beast tamers with divine marks in the Dragon Empire. The guy next to her confirmed her words and called Yongyang a dreamer. Class A's monster training instructor Zhang Guofu turned to Su and noted that his Yongyang, although not a genius, was a master of chatter and smiled widely. B-class monster trainer master Su Tianghua reminded Zhang Guofu that Yongyang had won first place in the test. He showed that the A-class master didn't need to say much. Su Tianghua said that perhaps Yongyang would indeed be able to awaken the divine mark, but no one knew for sure. Zhang Guofu smirked and asked Su Tianghua not to think about nonsense. He said that he had already made inquiries and that Yan Yan was an ordinary orphan and that his parents were simple beggars without a drop of talent during their lifetime. His adopted sister Yang Bing really shocked everyone when she received a divine mark. Zhang Guofu smiled even wider and emphasized that only these two were not blood relatives and therefore all of Yongyang's chances were extremely small. Zhang Guofu asked Su Tianghua to better prepare himself as Zhaoing would outshine everyone and force Yongyang to be overshadowed. Suddenly a loud laugh was heard. A girl slowly began to climb into the arena. The show was about to begin. Many people were wondering what kind of beast mark Zhaoing would receive if she had always been the second in the school rankings. Zhaoing looked very confident. With her strength and current achievements, she didn't worry about things going wrong. The girl waved her hand and activated the crystals. Almost everything simultaneously began to shine with multicolored lights. The girl managed to light as many as 7 rays. The guy standing next to Yongyang opened his mouth in surprise and shouted that this couldn't be happening. He couldn't believe his eyes, and he definitely wanted to too. He repeated over and over again how the girl was lucky enough to get a divine sign. One of the men shouted for everyone to look up, noting that there was something there. The legendary Black Phoenix appeared in the sky. This shocked everyone present. In the Dragon Empire, no one had been able to summon a Black Phoenix for about 200 years, and its appearance was a real sensation. Master loudly announced to everyone that Zhaoing had received divine rank with SS talent. Someone from the crowd pointed out that now Zhaoing could definitely get into the Heavenly Dragon Academy and could even write her name into history. The master approached the girl and told her that she was a real genius and noted that the Dragon Empire was based on people like her. The girl was shy. Smiling and looking away, she thanked him for the kind words and promised to try to become stronger. The master waved his hand and declared that the last one should enter the arena. It was Yongyang. He pulled himself together and walked towards the arena with the utmost seriousness. Zhaoing, without turning to face him, said that this time the victory was hers. Yongyang asked her not to rush to conclusions, only slightly turning his head in her direction. Zhang Guofu grinned and said that he couldn't wait to see what rank Master Su's best disciple would receive. It was Yongyang's turn. He took his first steps towards the arena. He focused and set himself up for only the best results. When he entered the arena and activated the crystals, the voices of the spectators were heard, shocked by what the hell was happening. One of the guys noted that all 12 light crystals lit up. It was really amazing. No one could believe it because Yongyang was from a poor background and it seemed like he didn't even have a chance to get a very high rank. Zhaoing was the most shocked because she wanted Yongyang to remain behind her in his achievements. Someone shouted for everyone to look up. The silhouettes of huge beasts shrouded in lightning appeared in the sky. Nobody understood where they all came from. After a few seconds, everyone began to understand what was happening, but they denied it until the very end. Many thought that this should not have happened when the sign of the beast awakened. It was amazing that Yongyang was actually able to achieve this. There was a huge shining scroll in the sky. Yen, watching everything that was happening, didn't understand only one thing. He didn't understand where his beast sign was. I don't know about the meaning of the appearance of scrolls and thunderstorms. The scroll began to accelerate and fell straight towards Yongyang. In the next moment, they merged into one. Yongyang froze in place. He felt that incredible power that entered him. The sign of the beast of the Chronicle of Mountains and Seas was successfully tied. Now he could randomly summon creatures from the annals of the mountains and seas. Yen didn't know what they were talking about. He had never really heard about it before. A system notification was issued that the summoned beast was found to be missing, and it was suggested to summon it. Everyone present was confused. They whispered among themselves and tried to figure out what was happening, but no one could fully believe what they saw. One of the masters exhaled heavily and said that he was very sorry. He shouted loudly that Yongyang, a divine rank and SSS talent, had awakened the trash beast mark ancient scroll. Everyone fell silent and stared at the master. One of the guys laughed loudly, noting that the person was like that and his sign was like that, and joked that this was all that was given to the SSS rank talent. Zhang Guofu grinned and noted that there was so much noise, but in the end it turned out to be just a nonentity, and turning to Su Tianghua said that his disciple against real monsters was just a walking meat snack. He started laughing that Yongyang was going to hit the monsters with a twist on the head. He couldn't stop laughing, not even trying to cover up his gloating. Yen also heard the conversation of the masters and understood what happened. It was said that he had awakened some dusty waste paper, and for such a bookworm it was even logical. Yongyang, with great guilt, approached his mentor and waited for him to tell him. Su Tianghua asked Yongyang not to be upset because awakening the beast mark was pure luck. He put his hand on the boy's shoulder and said that he believed that with his abilities he would succeed even without a summoned beast. Yen thanked him for his words and asked if he could go now. The guy was very upset and did not want to be in such a crowded place where everyone was laughing at him. The mentor smiled with difficulty and allowed the young man to leave to have a good rest. When Yongyang was leaving through the crowd, he heard all sorts of mockery directed at him. They openly laughed at him and tried to humiliate him. It was a universe where wormholes appeared one after another, bringing chaos and destruction. A very important event took place a week before the exams. It was at this time that everyone was going through the awakening of the mark of the beast. Only those who awakened the sign of the beast could become a tamer and could summon powerful monsters. This was the only way to resist the nightmares emerging from the wormholes. In the country of J, they summoned the eight-headed snake Oridi, who cleared the territory of the country of all wormholes. In the country of K, a vengeful mountain spirit was summoned, and he dispelled all the forbidden zones shrouded in fog. In the country of M, a mysterious creature named Venom was summoned, who began to capture neighboring states. And Yongyang's native dragon empire lost contact with its ancient heritage, which led to the loss of sacred totems in the Temple of Fate, and now the beast tamers could not summon strong monsters. The great power of the East faded away and became an object of ridicule for other countries. These were the realities of the modern world that Yen lived in. He took on a huge responsibility and was eager to change the world. After the failed ceremony, he walked through the forest. He walked slowly and thought a lot about what had happened. It was incredibly hard for him to realize that he was the weakest of all he knew. It was also hard for him to accept all the ridicule and mockery directed at him. Stopping in the middle of the road, he asked the system to open the status window. But when he looked at his stats, he gasped. He found that he had a super divine rank. Having studied this, he realized that all the mockery was only because no one had heard about it before and many considered it some kind of nonsense. The description said that he could randomly summon creatures from the annals of mountains and seas, and while his beast was alive it would take all damage instead of it. Yongyang was delighted that he actually managed to open it. This beast mark was incredibly cool, and now no one could kill him with a surprise attack. After that, he decided to test his SSS level talent. There he saw that he possessed a level 1 divine inspiration which increased the characteristics of the owner and his beast tenfold. Yongyang was shocked that with only the first level of this talent it had such an effect. He thought that it was some kind of cheating talent. Well, besides he also had a super divine sign and therefore success was guaranteed to him. The system asked if Yongyang wanted to summon his beast. Yen accepted the call without much thought. He was eager to test all his abilities. A yellow-green glow appeared in front of him. This magical vortex rose to the very sky. Yongyang could not take his eyes off it, wondering what kind of power he now possessed. The silhouette of his beast began to appear in the sky, but it was covered in flames, making it impossible to see the beast right away. But soon Yongyang learned that he had succeeded in summoning the SSS-ranked Sunset Dragon beast. The beast's eyes glowed blood red. Just the sight of this beast would make the opponents run away in fear. Yen revealed the full characteristics of his beast. All the initial characteristics started from 1,000 units, which was simply incredible. In addition, the Sunset Dragon reduced the characteristics of enemies and had 2 powerful attack skills. And even the most powerful first-level beast did not have a single characteristic that reached the mark of 100 units. Yongyang was amazed and now understood what talent of this level meant. He himself could not believe that he now had a tenfold increase in characteristics. Yongyang reached out to his beast. He turned to it and gave the first order. Yongyang ordered the Sunset Dragon to bow before him. In the temple on the pedestals, the power of these different animals was visible. Suddenly there was a bright flash like an explosion. Something changed. This temple was called the Temple of Fate, and indeed the fate of many was decided there. One of the guys ran up to the mentors and told them that something had happened in the Temple of Fate. Namely, a sacred totem of an SSS rank beast had suddenly appeared. One of the masters was shocked by this, and he asked the guy again if he had really misheard it. Another of the mentors noted that there had been no SSS-ranked creatures in the Dragon Empire for so many years and suggested that the lost legacy might have returned. The Seniority mentor replied that there was no need to rush and that everything had to be checked first. They immediately went to the Temple of Fate to see everything with their own eyes. When they got to the temple and saw what had happened, they realized that, without a doubt, it was a power that only SSS-ranked totems had. It was surprising that this could be a harbinger of a new flowering of the Dragon Empire. One of the mentors noted that the level of national luck increased by 1,000 points. He waved his hand and ordered that people be sent out to search immediately. And even if they had to dig the ground, they had to find the one who had summoned this beast. This rumor quickly spread to everyone. A friend of Yen, who was just in charge, asked if he had also received the message and asked if he wanted to join the team. Yen replied that he received the message but wanted to go alone. That ours was very surprised and asked if he was tired of living since he wanted to expose himself to such danger. One of the guys from the side began to laugh at Yongyang, saying that his Chronicle of the Mountain of the Seas would read a fairy tale to the monsters and they would all fall asleep. Another one picked up and said that the one with such a trashy animal sign was going to swing, which was very funny. Yan's friend hugged his friend and whispered that he was just trying to help, but that he was doing something incomprehensible. Zhaoing immediately came up to them and said that it was impossible to look at Yongyang without tears and offered to do him a favor and go with her. Yen noted that there was no point in him pumping with someone because it took too long. Zhaoing didn't expect such impudence and reminded that she had the mark of a divine-ranked beast and it couldn't last long. After these words, the girl froze and clarified that he had just decided to level up as quickly as possible, and suggested that he might be planning to enroll in the Heavenly Dragon Academy. Others and the guys noted that to get there you had to be at least level 10 and such scum could not achieve such results. Zhaoing noted that since they both decided to go there, they could make a bet in which the one who raised the level faster would win. Yongyang chuckled at her statement. He waved his hand at the girl and said that he would wait for her at the finish line and entered the portal. Zhaoing asked the guy where he was going and in a commanding tone asked him to wait. But the guy didn't react in any way and disappeared into the portal. The girl smiled and summoned a black phoenix. She thought that Yongyang was only level 1, but she had a divine rank beast mark and could handle a level 2 horn steed without any problem. She attacked the phoenix prizes. Phoenix did not keep him waiting and immediately killed the horse. A few seconds later, the animal was already lying lifeless on the green grass. The girl smiled broadly and noted out loud that no one else could level up so quickly. Meanwhile, Yongyang is much deeper into the forest. A pack of huge wolves ran away not far from him. He was surprised that he immediately ran into monsters of the 3rd level and even a whole pack. He understood that this was a dangerous opponent, and if someone else were in his place, he would have already been bitten to death. However, he had an area attack and his beast would take all the damage if anything happened. Don't think twice, he used dragon breath on a pack of wolves. There was a violent explosion after which it was very difficult to survive. Where the monsters were, everything began to shine and flare up. The system immediately gave a notification that the 3rd level forest wolf was defeated and experience points were awarded. Yongyang smiled widely, happy that he now had such powerful strength that 3rd level monsters were defeated with one blow. On top of that, Yongyang's level was also raised. The Chronicle of Mount Maria gave him 3 matchmakers for the beasts at once. If he could summon one more, the farm would go even faster. He was sorry that spiritual energy was restored at only 10 points of money, but for a new summoning he needed all 100. But this did not stop him, and he decided that then the Sunset Dragon would have to take the rap for everyone. He waved his hand and summoned the Sunset Dragon. Soon he managed to defeat a 2nd level wild boar and also get experience for it. After that, he defeated the poisonous scorpion of the first experience, which gave very little experience. Yongyang stayed in the forest for a long time, defeating monsters and leveling up. Suddenly, he heard something growling and heavy steps behind him. When he returned, he found that behind him stood a level 5 forest wolf king who was a serious opponent. He was much stronger and faster than a normal wolf. He tore his target apart with his sharp fangs, dealing 120% of his strength. Yen thought to herself that others would immediately run away upon seeing this monster. Well, unfortunately for this monster, he ran into Yongyang. Yongyang waved his hand and ordered the Sunset Dragon to destroy the wolf. From behind his back, the fiery breath of the summoned beast fell upon the wolf. The wolf tried to jump aside from the powerful stream of fire. Yen smiled and thought that it was not for nothing that this monster was called a killer of newbies. This beast was even able to dodge the attack of the Sunset Dragon. The dragon's attack only angered the Wolf King. He bristled and began to growl loudly. In one sharp leap, he covered a great distance, trying to pounce on Yongyang and tear him to shreds. Yongyang didn't even move from his spot and just smiled broadly. He turned to the Sunset Dragon and gave it a command. The dragon roar skill was used, which was difficult to hide from. The wolf immediately fell under this attack. The Wolf King had no chance to dodge it. The monster immediately disappeared into thin air as if it had never existed. Yongyang smiled when he saw this. He noted that the dragon roar attack only hit 10 meters and the wolf itself entered the target area. After killing the Wolf King, a trophy in the form of a spiritual energy stone was obtained. This surprised Yongyang very much. He couldn't believe his eyes because he had never received such awards before. Teacher Su told him that this item completely restored spiritual energy. Yongyang was very lucky to get it. The system gave a notification whether Yongyang wanted to use the item immediately. Yongyang decided to use it immediately without hesitation. He confirmed his choice and the effect of this trophy was immediately applied. Yongyang restored 100 points of spiritual energy to himself, which made it possible to summon another beast. Yongyang was delighted with what was happening to him, and he was looking forward to what he would achieve next. The young man waved his hand and summoned another beast. A huge energy vortex formed directly above him. A creature began to emerge very slowly from this funnel. A portal of light appeared from the core of the funnel to the ground through which the beast was supposed to appear. The beast from the Chronicle of the Sea Mountain, the SS rank dragon turtle, was summoned. Seeing this beast, Yongyang was even more amazed. He was glad that, in the annals of the mountains and seas, all the monsters were so cool. Although the dragon turtle's characteristics still didn't reach the SSS rank of the Sunset Dragon. But she had a high stamina rating, thick armor, and damage reduction skills. On top of that, the dragon turtle had provocation skills. Yongyang wondered what would happen if combined with the Sunset Dragon's area attacks. All in all, this turned out to be a win-win combination in any fight. One of the assistants appeared again in the citadel and noted that something incredible had happened in their world again. One of the mentors asked what the matter was. He was informed that another sacred totem had appeared in the Temple of Fate. The mentor was very surprised and replied that this could not have happened. Another of the mentors immediately asked what rank this beast was. The assistant reported that this totem was SS rank and their national luck increased by 500 points. In 2 days, this was already the second totem and also of a very high rank. The mentors could not believe what was happening and could not find a reason for it. The assistant noted that judging by the indicators of these two creatures, the same person summoned them, and his level had not even reached 10th. It was even more unimaginable. The masters could not believe that all this was happening because of one tamer. A girl approached Master Su and noted that his disciples were talking about Yongyang entering the beginner's dungeon and asked if it was true. One of the disciples was surprised to hear this and also asked if it was true, not expecting that Yongyang also went there. One of the other students noted that his trash beast mark couldn't even summon creatures and that it was pure suicide. Teacher Su chuckled and replied that according to other students, Yongyang could still summon monsters. The girl grinned, not believing his words, and asked him if his student could summon a real beast or if it was just a whistle on legs. It was also difficult for Teacher Su to hear this, but he could not protect his disciple when most people considered him a failure. The mentor thought to himself that Yongyang had decided not to give up so easily. The girl noticed a funnel in the sky and noted that apparently someone was supposed to arrive from there. Zhou Jianhua, the head of the Subei branch of the Monster Tamer Guild, arrived on a huge griffin. He was a fairly young man, looking very serious and self-confident. One of the mentors immediately greeted the gentleman and asked if he had come to see what progress his daughter had made, and immediately explained that she had not finished yet and would have to wait a little. The gentleman only glanced sideways at the mentor. His gaze was filled with obvious disdain. The funnel did not go away, and the crowd began to shout that someone was coming out of it. One of the gentleman's assistants began to say something but stopped. A little later, he noted that it was most likely the master's daughter, but instead of Zhaoing, Yongyang appeared first. Mentor Su was as surprised as everyone else and asked how the young man managed to return first. Yan smiled and replied that he himself did not understand this and explained that he calmly beat monsters, and then the system suddenly said that he had completed the dungeon and then simply threw him out of there. The young man thought to himself that he had just risen to level 5 and was about to farm level 10 mobs when suddenly a level 10 savage chieftain appeared out of nowhere. Then the Sunset Dragon accidentally fried him until golden brown, and the system immediately threw him out of the dungeon. Teacher Zhang Guofu shouted that it was impossible because even the most talented students of previous years spent at least 2 days to complete it. Well, suddenly the mentor fell silent and looked closely at the young man. He practically shouted that the boy was already level 5, which was hard to believe. Even Mentor Su himself didn't believe it, and his mouth dropped open in surprise. Zhang Guofu asked Yongyang if his beast mark wasn't just a useless scroll, how he could level up to level 5 so quickly, and who exactly did he summon. Yongyang was a little worried and wondered whether he should tell the truth now or present this information in some other way. Mentor Su saw the young man's distress and immediately called him, supposedly protecting him from unnecessary attention. He immediately approached him and put his arm around his shoulders, leading him away and talking about how he had been leveling up all day and was probably too tired, so he should go home and get a good rest. As soon as they walked away, a little Mentor Su whispered to the guy not to tell anyone who his summoned beast was until the exams. Yongyang thanked his mentor for the advice and promised that he would do so. In recent years, the only one who passed the beginner dungeon on the first day was Yan Bing, who was the pride of the Dragon Empire. However, she left only 2 minutes before the end, and Yongyang finished an hour earlier, and this was already beyond reasonable limits. After some time, the crowd turned its attention to the portal again. The second one to emerge from the dungeon was Zhaoing. The girl was already level 4. She considered herself the best of all and walked proudly through the crowd. One of the guys noted that he had a beast with a rank, but even after a whole day of grinding, he could only rise to level 2. Another of the students devalued his rank and pointed out that he had a B-rank beast, even he could only reach level 2. The girl passing by heard all the conversations as if she was looking for someone specific in the crowd. Her father appeared behind her and asked if she was looking for anyone. The girl was definitely concerned about this and asked if he had seen Yan. The man was surprised by this question and replied that he had completed the dungeon an hour earlier than everyone else and had left after reaching the 5th level. The girl heard this and immediately became angry. She didn't understand how it was possible that Yongyang himself came first, clearing the dungeon and reaching a level higher than hers. The portal remained open until the tests were completed. Yen stopped in the middle of the road and, watching the portal, thought about the exams that were supposed to be in 5 days. He should have leveled up to at least level 7. Suddenly a girl came up to him and hugged him by the arm, admired how quickly he was swinging, and asked him to help her raise her level 2. Another girl appeared next to him, grabbed his other hand and asked to go to the party with him. He clarified that she didn't even have a boyfriend yet. Yen pulled himself out of the girl's embrace and sharply replied that he was not interested and quickened his pace. The girls immediately started discussing him and calling him names because he already considered himself a genius, although in fact he was nobody. Zhaoing came up to them and listened to what were you talking about. The girl was still very angry. She was filled with envy, and besides, she did not understand how this could happen to Yongyang. Soon Yongyang went to the dungeon again to kill the monster and raise his level even higher. See if he realized that this time he was thrown into a different place. There were too many monsters around, something he wasn't used to seeing. Well, overall it was very good. He could level up faster and also check out what else the dragon turtle was capable of. He waved his hand and called his beasts. The sunset dragon and the dragon turtle appeared in the sky. They were already ready to defeat Yongyang's enemies. Yongyang ordered the dragon turtle to use provocation. He wanted to see how exactly this skill worked. The dragon turtle landed on the ground and assumed an attack stance. It roared and attracted enemies to itself. When the monster's attention was drawn, Yongyang commanded the sunset dragon to attack them. Immediately, the sunset dragon released a flame that burned everything in its path. Immediately, the 6th level poisonous snake and the 4th level wild fox were defeated, and Yongyang was awarded experience points. Next, the level 5 black bear and level 6 poisonous snake were defeated. Yongyang smiled happily because the dragon turtle and farm became even faster. The beasts were pumped up, and thanks to his talent, some of the sunset dragon's characteristics already exceeded 3,000 units. Here Yen realized that this dungeon for beginners was no longer enough for him. Now he had to try and find something more difficult. After that, he encountered another monster. A mutated level 10 black bear was defeated without much trouble. Killing this bear gave Yongyang an item. It was the Soul Rip Tamer skill book. Soul Rupture dealt direct damage to the enemy's soul, ignoring defense. The strength depended on the tamer's spirit stats, and Yongyang decided that he could learn this skill as well. Thanks to this skill, he could fight even without beasts. Without thinking twice, he immediately learned this skill. The system notified that Yongyang now possessed the Soul Rip skill. After leveling up some more, Yongyang went in search of other monsters with which he could engage in battle. After a short search, he managed to meet a monster that looked like a werewolf. The werewolf immediately became aggro on Yongyang. He shouted loudly and beat his chest, calling for a fight. Yongyang just smiled when he saw a new target to test his skills on. He moved his hand to the side and used the Soul Break skill. A purple energy sphere began to form in his palm. He put his hand on the werewolf and activated the skill. The energy beam of his new skill fell on the monster. The characteristics of this skill were high, even visually it looked great. As soon as the Soul Rupture overtook the monster, he screamed loudly and suddenly fell silent. The werewolf's eyes rolled back and he froze in place for a few seconds. But then he immediately collapsed to the ground without any signs of life. The system gave a notification that Yongyang had defeated the Savage Chieftain boss, and for this he received a whole 1,000 experience points. Then the system gave a notification congratulating him on completing the dungeon and asked him to come back the next day. Yen was shocked that he managed to kill such a strong monster in just one hit. A notification immediately appeared that, in 10 seconds, the dungeon would throw Yongyang back into the citadel. The mentors stood near the portal again and greeted the students with the dungeon. When Yongyang appeared, it caused the same reaction as the previous time. Mentor Su immediately ran up to him and began to scold him for leaving so early, since there were still 2 hours left and he could have continued to level up. Yongyang smiled and looked at his mentor and replied that he had killed the boss by accident and the system had thrown him back out again. The girl said out loud that this young man was bullying them and that something was clearly wrong. Zhang Guofu, red with rage, shouted that this guy was deliberately showing off in front of everyone and inflating his achievements. Master Su, upon hearing his student's explanation, immediately smiled and said that he could go and did not necessarily have to see him the next day. Yongyang, who was in no hurry to leave, told his mentor that he wanted to go to a dungeon called the Spider Hole. The mentor, hearing what Yongyang wanted from him, jumped up in amazement. He almost shouted, explaining that there were no protective barriers and it was a completely wild dungeon and it was risky to go in. He noted that the young man had already reached the 7th level and that was enough for admission. Yen Yen turned away and declared that he was not interested in ordinary universities. He looked at his teacher and declared that he wanted to enroll in the Heavenly Dragon Academy. This was something that Su's mentor definitely didn't expect to hear. He pulled his eyes out at the young man and asked him again if he had said exactly what he had said. Yen Yen explained that in order to pass the selection he needed to reach level 10 as quickly as possible, and the beginner dungeon was no longer suitable for him. Teacher Su wondered to himself whether Yongyang was serious about telling him this. The mentor lowered his gaze and replied that since Yongyang had already decided everything, he had no right to stop him. The mentor asked him to promise that he would be extremely careful, and if it became too dangerous he would immediately retreat and not act like a hero. Yen Yen promised that they would do everything as he was asked. Following Yongyang, Zhaoing appeared from the portal. Zhang Guofu approached her and immediately began to praise her for leaving an hour earlier this time, which was much faster than last time. The girl didn't answer him and only immediately asked where Yongyang was. The mentor coughed slightly and told the girl that he had left an hour ago and had already reached the 7th level. The girl became even more upset and even asked again if she had heard correctly. She was very annoyed because she had tried her best to get at least 6th place and Yongyang had beaten her again. She promised herself that next time she would definitely overtake him. The mentor heard the girl's reasoning and clarified that judging by everything, Yen Yen would not return to this portal tomorrow because he was going to the spider hole dungeon. The girl froze in place when she heard where her main rival was going. It was a dungeon of the 12th level, and even her Black Phoenix would have a hard time there. The girl tried to figure out what kind of trump card Yongyang had up his sleeve. Well, the girl decided not to give up and asked her mentor to allow her to go to the same dungeon as Yongyang. The next day, Yongyang went to one of the important buildings to buy items. He thought that it would be extremely difficult to get the norm with 2 animals, and he understood that he had to call the 3rd one as soon as possible. At the entrance to the room, there was a girl who greeted the young man in a friendly manner and asked how she could help. He asked whether they buy items dropped in dungeons. Without waiting for an answer, the young man dumped a whole pile of various objects that he had managed to find over the past few days onto the table. He emphasized that he would like to sell all these items and immediately buy a spiritual energy stone. The girl smiled and replied that it would be as he wished. The girl took all his things and handed him a stone of spiritual energy. Yen Yen took the stone from the curious examiner and asked if he was entitled to change. The girl explained that all his loot was only from the beginner's dungeon. Unfortunately, it was almost worthless, so all his money was spent on the spiritual energy stone. This made Yongyang very upset because he expected to get at least a little more money. He spent 2 days on a practically endless farm and still had no coin left. He thought life was unfair. The girl suggested that he go to the Seekers Guild and take a dungeon quest there to earn more money. This proposal greatly interested the young man, and he thanked the girl for such useful advice. After the shop, he immediately went to the guild. About the possible quests, he realized that they were too difficult. But one thing still managed to catch his attention. This quest had a nightmare difficulty, but the reward was a development stone for the beast. Without thinking twice, he decided to accept this particular quest. Only after confirming his choice was he teleported to the dungeon. To complete the dungeon on nightmare difficulty, he needed to summon the 3rd beast as quickly as possible. He looked around before taking out his stone. Everything around him was too dark and gloomy, but the sky, which was too high, was very clear. He took out the stone and used it immediately. Spiritual energy was restored to 100 units, and now he could summon another beast, which he immediately did. He was eager to quickly get a 3rd assistant and was even more interested in finding out who exactly it would be. A funnel hung in the air again, from which a beam of light descended to the ground. Very quickly, the beast he had summoned finally began to appear from the funnel. Yongyang couldn't stop thinking about who the 3rd summoned beast would be and what rank it would be. It was that moment of the beast's summoning that seemed eternal to him. The funnel took a long time to generate and send the summoned animal to the ground. But when the young man saw what appeared, he was practically scared. Very suddenly, it became very dark outside. As if in an instant, night had come. In the Temple of Fates, all the masters gathered again. They watched as the crystals activated again and another totem animal was about to be added. At first, it was very difficult to make out what exactly was in front of them. All the signs danced in a circle, creating a slightly creepy picture. The masters calmly waited for that very totem to appear. One of the masters replied that in the 1,000 years of the temple's existence, nothing like what happened to them had ever happened. It had been a long time since you had appeared there 3 times in a row. One of the masters noted that the new totem was located even higher than that of the Sunset Dragon. Immediately, the level of national luck increased by 1,500 units. The master noted that the heavens were on their side and that their empire would soon rise again. Through the glow, a human hand appeared firmly holding a giant battle axe. But the face of this creature was on his stomach. He had an almost human form but no head. He was a huge godlike being. A beast from the Xintian Mountains and Sea's Chronicle of SSS rank was summoned. Yongyang noted out loud that this creature was not called the God of War for nothing because its initial characteristics were even cooler than those of the Sunset Dragon. The records of Mount Maria were the greatest treasure in history and a true heritage of antiquity. Upon meeting his summoned beast, Yongyang laughed loudly with happiness. The masters discussed what was known about this new summoned beast. Analysts confirmed that it was a SSS rank beast and that it would be done again by the same tamer who had not even reached level 10 yet. Another of the masters was even less confident in what was happening after the third totem was activated. He ordered that this tamer be found at any cost because the future of their empire depended on it. Another of the masters reported that they checked all the students who had awakened high-ranking beasts, and he was not among them, and his identity seemed to be hidden by some mysterious force. The master, hearing this, exhaled heavily and said that then he would have to wait for the exam in 3 days. Yes, they could all find out who this young man really was. The action took place near the entrance to the Spider Hole dungeon. Everyone tried to find a partner to go through and level up. One of the guys invited someone of level 13 to join him for a general walkthrough, and one of the girls immediately responded to this. When the tamers saw Yongyang, they immediately stood up to discuss him because he was only level 7 and they considered his presence in such a place to be nonsense. The girl approached him and called him baby, asked if he was lost, and offered to take him home. Yen walked past her and thanked her, replying that he could manage without help. One of the guys said quite sharply that it would be better for him not to go in because this was not the same dungeon as at school and there were disasters here from which it was impossible to come out alive. Yongyang heard this and wondered if these were the disasters from which the heart of the disaster could be knocked out. The tamer confirmed and warned that such people had to be dealt with immediately, otherwise his death would be the least of the problems. He explained that because of this, emotional luck could suffer. And this was already on a completely different scale. Yongyang thanked him for the warning and replied that he had come specifically for this disaster. The tamer asked through laughter whether he had misheard it. Yen approached the portal and the system offered him to choose a difficulty level. Heart of Calamity only dropped on Nightmare, so Yongyang had already decided everything long ago and immediately chose the Nightmare level. The portal has been activated and all that remains is to enter it. They called him a little fool, believing that he didn't even realize what was waiting for him in the dungeon. Yongyang, completely ignoring such discussions, took a step into the portal. He was very surprised when he appeared in the dungeon and there was already a monster in front of him. In front of him was a warrior spider whose attacks poisoned the target and dealt additional damage over a certain period of time. Yen thought that, as I expected from a nightmare, even the ordinary monsters here were elite and already at level 12. He summoned the dragon turtle and told it to use taunt. The turtle immediately began to fulfill its owner's wish. Following her, Yongyang summoned Xiantian. After the two had already attacked the monster, Yongyang summoned the sunset dragon and ordered it to attack as well. Everything around was engulfed in flames. The elite spider warrior of the 12th level was defeated and a spider longsword was obtained from it. Yongyang liked that with Xintian and the tenfold boost from divine inspiration, even the 12th level elite monsters were not scary to him. An hour later, Yongyang managed to defeat the warrior spider, the lead spider, and the young one. He tried for so long in that dungeon but never encountered a single disaster, and he began to doubt that the difficulty of the nightmare guaranteed their spawn. Looking into the distance, into the darkness, Yongyang discovered two glowing eyes. Another huge monster attacked him very suddenly. This was most likely the monster of disaster that the young man had been looking for so long. I looked at his characteristics. Yen thought that he had simply unrealistic stats. Yen tensed up a little but quickly pulled himself together and decided that he would be able to deal with this monster too. He ordered his summoned beasts to tear the monster of disaster to shreds, and they immediately pounced on him. This monster had both high defense and a lot of health. Yen assumed that even 3 against 1 was very difficult and the situation was getting heated. But suddenly Yongyang remembered that he had a soul rupture skill that ignored defense and dealt pure damage. The young man immediately put his hand out and began to activate his skill. A purple energy sphere began to appear on his hand. Once the energy reached its peak, Yongyang released it onto the monster. She immediately hit her target and the spider froze in place. A lot of dust and ash rose up around. Everything around became quiet and it seemed like the monster was no longer there. But he appeared again, and now he was only targeting Yongyang and not his summoned beasts. At this point, the young man became worried. He looked straight into the huge toothy mouth of the monster of disaster, thanks to which he could simply bite it into hundreds of small pieces. Pomig released one of its stings, which flew at an incredibly high speed straight towards the young man. Yen understood that it came too fast and he wouldn't have time to dodge. Yongyang was already prepared for the fact that death or great damage awaited him. But suddenly everything went quiet. He felt himself and did not understand how he managed to avoid such an attack. But suddenly he realized that this happened due to the peculiarities of the Chronicle of the Mountains and Seas, and all the damage was redirected to the dragon turtle. Yen understood that even with his defense, he wouldn't last long, and it was necessary to finish quickly. He used Soul Rip again and aimed it at the maximum on the monster. With his skill, he hit his target accurately and the spider froze in place again. Well, this attack couldn't kill him, but only distracted his attention for a short time. Yongyang ordered the dragon to spew flames from itself, which would be how to finish off this monster. Yongyang led the dragon to divert all of the monster's attention to himself. The monster of disaster was burning and did not move. Yongyang came closer to it. He looked closely and tried to understand whether he had managed to defeat this monster or not. Soon a notification appeared that the level 13 poisonous calamity spider had been defeated and a calamity heart item had been obtained. In addition to this, Yongyang also received the mask of disaster and the bow of disaster. The young man was extremely happy that he had succeeded. In addition, the spider dropped a spiritual energy stone and a full set of equipment. With such items, his skills were strengthened even more and gave many advantages. The spirit staff not only added spirit but also strengthened Yongyang's own skill. The spider mask gave the ability to become invisible. Yongyang almost jumped on the spot with joy because all this was ideal for ambushes and retreats. Suddenly, the dragon turtle roared loudly, attracting attention. Yongyang jumped up on the spot, very worried about his summoned beast. He ran up to her and told her to return to the sign and gain more strength after such a difficult battle. Right in front of him, the turtle dissolved, returning to its world. Yongyang was a little upset because if the sting of death had not hit the dragon turtle, everything would have been fine. He blamed himself for the fact that the beast suffered so much. He decided to find a way to increase his own endurance as quickly as possible so as not to risk his summoned animals. Many of the participants had already returned from the dungeon and were discussing their successes. Some of them said that they had underestimated the danger of such a place. He said that he was surrounded by monsters and he barely managed to fight them off, and everything could have ended very badly. The girl who wanted to take Yen home shouted to everyone that he had returned and was already at level 9. Many were shocked that he actually survived on the nightmare difficulty level while only being on level 7. The girl suggested that he might have a strong beast. The guy next to her denied it because even the strongest summoned beasts could not carry such a complexity alone. Yen returned to the guild where he took the quest. The system gave a notification that he had managed to complete the Heart of Calamity quest and the reward was sent to the inventory. Yongyang was incredibly pleased with his results because with such enhancements to his beast, nothing could stop him, and all his efforts were not in vain. But first he needed to sell the items that dropped in the dungeon and only then start upgrading the beast. He went to the shop again to sell everything he didn't need. He walked so quickly that he practically didn't notice anything in front of him. By chance, he caught his shoulder on the shoulder of a girl passing by. The girl fell to the ground out of surprise. I immediately started to get indignant and swear at the young man, asking where he was going so fast that he couldn't see anything around him. Yen immediately blushed with shame and began to apologize for his actions and for not noticing the girl. The girl immediately stood up and began to accuse him of pushing her on purpose just to touch her and called him a pervert. Yen began to deny and explain that she simply wanted to sell him things from the underground as quickly as possible and was in a hurry. The girl looked at him suspiciously and thought to herself that he was only level 9 and how could he have something valuable. Her gaze fell on the sword in his sheath. She immediately recognized that it was indeed a spider sword, which greatly surprised her. Very suddenly her behavior changed and she called him cute and put her arm around his shoulder. She immediately turned into a very sweet and flirtatious girl and asked him why he had to waste time then and offered to sell everything to her. Yen, still red as a tomato, replied that they had not even met and he had no reason to trust the girl. The girl stepped aside and, adjusting her hair, asked him if he had ever heard of the Fairy Guild. Jiang Xiaozhu from the Fairy Guild introduced herself to us and explained that she was responsible for purchasing equipment and materials, but she promised that the young man would definitely not be left at a loss and swore on the name of her guild. Yan thought that the prices on the market were really below the baseboard and selling to this girl would be much more profitable. Yan stated that he also had rare equipment and asked if the girl would take it all at once. Zhang Xiaozhu immediately became interested and asked him to show her everything quickly. He immediately provided her with a complete list of what he had for sale. The girl was almost speechless and noted that all this equipment only fell out of disaster. As soon as she said this, Yongyang immediately covered her mouth with his hand and asked her to speak less loudly. He explained that there were too many people around them and he didn't want to attract attention to himself. The girl replied that he was right and agreed with him. She whispered in his ear and noted that he was only level 9, but it was unclear where he got so many rarities from and hoped that he didn't steal them. Yan was embarrassed and replied that you were in no way stolen and asked whether she would buy it or not. Zhang Xiaozhu smiled and said that she would definitely buy everything. The girl blinked her eyelashes and noted that the button might think that he was not only cute but also so strong. The girl went on to say that since Yongyang was so capable, she had one proposal for him. Yan looked at the girl suspiciously but still asked what exactly she meant. She said that in the south there was a secret dungeon, a goblin mine level 14, and she needed the skull of the Goblin King. Zhang Xiaozhu came closer to Yongyang and said that if he could get this helmet, she would at least marry him as a token of gratitude. Yan became shy again and replied that he was pleased, but he was not one of those who would fall for something like that. He thought to himself that at such a time even the guys wanted to take care of themselves a little. The girl began to persuade him to tell her that the skull of the Goblin King was expensive and he would not regret it at all, and such an offer was no worse than a marriage proposal. Yan didn't hesitate for long and very quickly agreed, explaining that he himself wanted to go to a more difficult dungeon and the 14th level would be just right for him. The girl was happy about this and promised that she would wait for news from him. As soon as she left, Yongyang counted the money and checked whether he had sold everything he wanted. After that, he decided to find a secluded place to increase the development of the beast. He didn't even suspect that someone was watching him. This person was hiding in the shadows and noted to himself that Yongyang was level 9 but was able to clear the spider hole dungeon alone. This man was very interested in Yongyang's personality and was unlikely to just leave him alone. Yongyang found a secluded place and decided to use the evolution stone on the Xintian. As soon as he confirmed his decision, the request was accepted, but it was worth waiting a little. Right before Yongyang's eyes, Xintian began to transform. It was clear how much more strength this beast had. The cultivation of the summoned beast Xintian has been increased to the 2nd level. When Yongyang looked at the new characteristics of this beast, he was amazed because they almost caught up with that spider of disaster. In addition, he gained a skill with a one-shot chance. Yan decided that even though the percentage was small, the ability to kill a disaster with one blow was a level that other beasts could only dream of. Without wasting any time, Yongyang headed to that very dungeon with the goblins. Approaching, he decided that judging by everything, this was the very place that Zhang had spoken about. He decided that it was worth immediately going to clean it up. Everything around was unimaginably beautiful. There were huge crystals located on the walls, floor, and ceiling of this dungeon. Yan first looked around. While he didn't even have time to carefully study where he found himself, a monster immediately came out to him. It wasn't hard to hear him thanks to the echo that was in the tunnel. Yan saw 4 goblins behind him and noted that he had immediately run into an ambush. Well, he understood that it was even to his advantage. Yongyang turned to the goblins and told them that he would not have to waste time searching for them individually. He decided to analyze each of his opponents before starting the attack. The system immediately gave a detailed description of each of the monsters. The young man thought to himself that, as expected from a level 14 dungeon, the monster's characteristics were noticeably higher. Well, after all, he was no longer as weak as before. He was prepared for this level of difficulty. He summoned Xintian first, inserting the others just in case. He ordered the side-like creature to show everything he was now capable of. Xintian burst out of nowhere and immediately rushed to attack. He hit all his opponents at once with one fairly powerful attack. This first attack took down a level 14 advanced goblin. Yongyang was pleased that after being promoted to the 2nd star, Xintian became not only stronger but also noticeably more agile. After a couple more attacks, the ambush was destroyed. The advanced level 13 goblin rifleman and the advanced level 14 goblin tank were defeated, and in addition to the experience points, Yongyang also received goblin skin. He noted that dealing with these goblins was as easy as walking through the park and suggested that he would be able to level up to level 10. He then summoned the dragon turtle, which had already recovered from the previous fight. He glanced at his other summoned beasts and, smiling, noted that their turn would definitely come. Soon they met more goblins who were as strong as the previous ones. But it wasn't that simple with them. These fights were harder and longer. Yen carefully watched what was happening, did not understand what the hell was going on. One of the goblins was able to block Xintian's attack. Immediately Yongyang began to analyze this goblin. He was a goblin general and was incredibly dangerous. That was the point, and Yongyang was not surprised that this goblin withstood the attack. His skills reduced incoming damage by 20%. At this point, the summoned Xintian beast had to activate another skill. Unleashed bloody madness on his enemies. His huge battle axe lit up with a bloody red color. It seemed that the attack would be so powerful that no one would be able to survive it. Xintian threw his axe straight at the goblin general. The godlike beast himself ran up after his axe and intensified his blow. The goblin general was defeated, and the grapes were given to the general's armor, the use of which required level 10. Yen was happy because he was going to save up for armor, but it came into his hands on its own. The need to reach level 10 only added to his motivation, and he decided to continue smashing monsters. He then summoned a dragon turtle. He waved his hand and ordered her to use provocation. The dragon turtle immediately landed on the ground and began to draw all the enemies towards itself. She picked up speed and ran forward, sending out special vibrations to lure all the monsters out of the cave. Its vibrations spread throughout the entire dungeon. Dozens of pairs of bright green eyes were already visible in the darkness. Yongyang immediately summoned Sunset Dragon and Xintian, ordering them to crush the goblins in front into dust. The beasts immediately attacked their enemies, obeying the order of their master. After 3 hours of fighting with goblins, many were already tired. The goblins continued to emerge from their ambushes, but Yen was able to defeat everyone with ease. The last one was Yan's advanced goblin slayer up to the 10th. The stats at level 10 have increased significantly compared to the previous ones, and all his other summoned beasts also became stronger. Yongyang thought that it was high time to visit the Goblin King and have a chat. Yen, without any fear, went straight to the strongest boss he had met so far. It was a huge monster the size of 10 ordinary goblins. Yen immediately turned on the analysis of the characteristics of this monster. Seeing its characteristics, he thought that this goblin was not a boss for nothing, because its parameters were even higher than those of the Spider of Disaster. The goblin boss ran close enough to Yongyang, opened his mouth wide and roared. Seeing this, Yongyang immediately realized that his affairs were quite bad. Yongyang immediately activated a life shield, trying to prevent unnecessary damage from such a monster. The shield was immediately activated, and Yongyang was slightly protected. All lives were a kind of sphere inside which Yongyang himself was placed. This sphere was supposed to help against the ultrasonic attack of the Goblin King. But even through this sphere, one could hear how powerful the roar of this beast was, and it seemed to Yongyang that he was almost being imprinted into the wall by it. Well, he immediately summoned all his beasts, leaving no one in the shadows, because only the strength of all three could help defeat this monster. The summoned beasts immediately appeared and were ready to attack. Yen warned that this goblin was much stronger than all those they had fought before, and they needed to act together and attack on signal. Xintian was the first to attack the Goblin King, screaming as he charged straight at the monster with his old axe. But no one could understand why he decided to do such a thing on his own and without any signals. This greatly surprised both Yongyang and the Sunset Dragon and the Dragon Turtle. Xintian used the skill of a smashing blow, jumped up with great speed, and swung his axe. It felt like everything around went dark for a couple of seconds. Near Yongyang, there was a paw of the Goblin King which did not move at all and lay limp on the ground. Yongyang smiled widely and couldn't believe that everything happened so quickly. The system gave a notification that the boss Goblin King had been defeated, which gave Yongyang 10 experience points, as well as the Goblin King skull and a spiritual energy stone. Yen was amazed because the chance of it working was only 1.5%, and he thought that Xintian could go to the casino with such luck. Yongyang bent down to pick up the Goblin King's skull. He thought that the most important thing was that he already had the skull and everyone was intact, so all he had to do was return to Zhang. He immediately went to the exit of the dungeon. But when he appeared outside this dungeon, a surprise awaited him. He immediately tensed up when he saw what greeted him. In front of him was a crowd of guys who were 100% waiting for him. He started asking why there were so many people in front of the entrance to the dungeon, but he understood what was going on. The guys pointed a finger at him and apparently told their leader that it was this guy who single-handedly killed the disaster. And now he has completed a level 14 dungeon, and apparently he had some kind of powerful artifact. Yen immediately noticed a badge on the chest of one of the guys and realized that he was clearly a member of some guild. Yen decided not to stand silently and asked what the guys wanted from him. One of the gang with a covered eye laughed that Yongyang was even asking about this. He spread his arms out to the sides and noted that he had been waiting for him all day. and if he didn't want trouble he would have to give up the Goblin King's skull in a good way. Then the guy added that he also liked the artifact and would have to borrow it probably without returning it. Yen said out loud his guess that they just wanted to rob him. The guy laughed and answered dryly that he simply wanted to borrow all his things and demanded that they be laid out quickly. Yen was not one of those who would simply give away what he had earned with such hard work and asked what would happen if he refused. The guy from the gang didn't like this and he roared in anger that they dared to treat him like that. They immediately pointed a crossbow at Yen and warned him that if something like that came out of his mouth he would be in trouble. Well, they threatened to cut off his head and it would fly apart into additional pieces. Yen tried to calm himself down and decided that he needed to get more information out of them first. He held out his hand and the skull of the Goblin King appeared on it. He turned to the guys and clarified that if they just came for money and wanted the skull of the Goblin King then it was now theirs. Another of the guys with a badge on his chest also laughed loudly and said that he hoped that Yongyang had a strong character but in reality he was a wimp. One of the guys began to nod in agreement and noted that as soon as Brother Lewin took out the crossbow Yongyang immediately deflated. The gang leader smiled sarcastically and noted that the guy finally realized what situation he was in and hurried him pointing out that he should not forget about the artifact. Yen was surprised as loudly as he could that they were talking about some kind of artifact and emphasized that he had nothing like that. The leader ordered him to stop fooling around and voiced her doubts that he couldn't have passed the Shaturn level dungeon without an artifact and without reaching level 10, and the Black Shark Guild wasn't stupid. This is what Yen wanted. He knew about this Black Shark Guild. They were not scumbags and he decided that such people could not be released. Yongyang plunged his hand into the portal as if taking out the things that were required of him. But in fact he took out one of the daggers and shouted that if they wanted the artifact they should try it first. And right in front of the Black Shark Guild Yongyang disappeared into thin air. While the guys were trying to figure out where Yen had gone he found himself right behind the leader. He acted very quickly and was very dangerous thanks to his dagger. I heard the very loud soul-rending cry of the leader of the Black Shark Guild. His whole life flashed before his eyes and then everything suddenly ended. The other two guys backed away to the sides. They started talking about how their brother Lung was dead, and immediately their courage and audacity evaporated somewhere. They decided to call their beasts and take revenge on Yongyang, understanding that they themselves cannot cope with him. The boys quickly got their bearings and were ready to fight. Lights appeared around signs of the approach of the summoned beasts. A few seconds later their animals appeared next to their owners. One of the guilds shouted that they had so many beasts that if each of them spat he would choke. Yongyang, hearing this, only grinned and replied that he understood them. Now it was his turn to show those who were on his side. The Sunset Dragon was immediately summoned and appeared with an incredibly loud roar and fiery breath. The guild boys froze in their seats in fear. They looked at the Sunset Dragon and couldn't believe their eyes. That such a thing was even possible. They also began to say that there was a small misunderstanding between them, realizing that they would not be able to withstand such a battle. Following, the dragon Xintian appeared. Yongyang looked very serious and was surprised that the guys were talking about some kind of misunderstanding. He emphasized that he would not believe it. He said that the Black Shark Guild had long been known for its bad reputation and that they were just unlucky enough to run into him today. He ordered Xintian to tear the guys to pieces. The boys screamed loudly and begged for mercy, but it was too late. Xintian could no longer be stopped even if the guy was apologized to very well. Yen did not participate in this fight, but only watched what was happening. He thought that even though the rule of survival of the strongest was in effect in this world, it was still the first time he had killed someone. 2 hours after the massacre near the Goblin Dungeon, Yongyang managed to give everything that was required of him to Jiang Shaozhu. The girl hung herself on his neck and kissed him for such help. Yongyang had received a whole bunch of resources from Jiang Shaozhu in exchange for the Goblin King's skull, and now he just had to wait for the exam to start. He went opposite the meeting place with this girl to his home, but very suddenly someone grabbed him by the shoulder. He abruptly grabbed the stranger's hand and demanded to explain who he was. It was Zhaoing who screamed what the guy was doing. Yen also let the girl go and asked what she was doing there. Zhaoing explained that she simply touched his shoulder. He appeared to be somewhat nervous and asked what he had done again. The girl screamed that it hurt because he was still holding one of her hands. He apologized and let go. Yen asked why the girl was looking for him, assuming that something might have happened. Zhaoing reminded that he said that he would go swinging in the hole, but the girl was unable to meet him there. Yen smiled and hesitantly said that he had already gone to another place and reached the 10th level. The girl jumped up and screamed, asking what he was talking about. She screamed at us that he was incredibly annoying her and he could have thought at least once about the feelings of others and not hit the self-esteem of those around him. Yan Yan smiled and explained that he was just lucky and the girl was actually very talented too. Zhaoing asked him to stop flattering her and presented him with the fact that he would go to the gym with her tomorrow, otherwise she would definitely not enter the Heavenly Dragon Academy. Yan Yan was surprised that the girl wanted his help because she herself could have finished the 10th level in the remaining time, and he did not see what the problem was. The girl tried to beat him and said that she didn't care, but he had to help her. Yan Yan smiled and noted to himself how persistent the girl was. Yongyang agreed and suggested that Zhaoing meet at the entrance to the spider hole the next day. The next day they actually met near the portal that led to the spider hole. This guy was standing next to them and shouting orders to get off the road. Yan Yan immediately noticed the badge on his chest. It was the same badge as those guys from the Black Shark Guild. Zhaoing led Yongyang along and asked him to stay away from those guys. Yongyang decided to find out everything and asked why. The girl said that her father said that yesterday the Black Shark Guild ran into someone it was better not to mess with. Yongyang tensed up a little and asked what exactly I meant, girl. Zhaoing was surprised that Yongyang hadn't heard anything about this and said that yesterday several Black Shark trainers disappeared without a trace. According to rumors, only badges were left at the scene of the crime. There were no bodies or other evidence. Yan Yan asked her if anyone had found out who was the culprit of what had happened. Zhaoing replied that nothing was known yet, but their guild had crossed many people's paths, so they had plenty of enemies, and no one could even imagine what really happened there. Zhaoing smiled and replied that this time the Black Shark Guild was in deep trouble. Yan Yan breathed a sigh of relief since apparently no one suspected him yet. The girl said that I was still very interested in who was able to cope with the Black Shark Guild, but noted that whoever it was, he was a real hero. Yongyang tried to hide the wide smile on his face not to give himself away. This flattered him very much. If it hadn't had consequences, he would have definitely confessed to the girl that it was him. Seeing Yongyang's strange expression, Zhaoing slapped him across the face and asked him not to belittle her idol under any circumstances. Yan Yan smiled and promised that he would not do that again and confirmed that her idol was a real hero. Near the entrance to the dungeon, they met a friend of Yongyang, who without embarrassment said that his friend had brought the school's most beautiful girl on a date. But suddenly he came to his senses and clarified that they had been arguing all the time, but now they were walking and talking well to each other and had become so close. Yan Yan asked him not to make things up and explained that Zhaoing simply asked him to help her level up just like he did. Zhaoing was very glad that there would be a third person with them. Yan Yan tried to calm his friend down, noting that these were all minor details. It was time for them to go to the dungeon. His friend agreed with him and expressed respect and agreed to go on the cleanup. Once again, the nightmare difficulty level was selected. Suddenly Yan Yan was very surprised and reminded that he was only level 5 and he did not want to go into the thick of it. Jan asked him not to worry and noted that as long as he was with them, everything would be fine. They entered the portal and were transported to the dungeons of the spider hole. A whole army of spiders immediately attacked them. They were huge and there were definitely more of them than last time at the beginning. Zhaoing tried to calm herself down and convinced herself that she was not afraid at all, even though the difficulty level was a nightmare. The girl summoned her Black Phoenix and Imperial Crocodile. She ordered them to show everything they were capable of in front of this and the insects. Suddenly Yan Yan was amazed and noted that the girl was not considered the queen of the school for nothing given her abilities and totems. The Black Phoenix immediately went to battle with the spiders, burning everything around. A huge spider appeared in front of them, which apparently was a small boss of this dungeon. Dealt damage with a poisonous spike that was fired at its opponents. Suddenly Yan Yan clearly panicked when he saw the elite spider of the 13th level. You understood that perhaps his animal could not cope with her. His summoned beast, the wolf, also trembled with fear, just like its master, doubting his own strength. Yongyang smiled and suggested that he would rather deal with this spider on his own. Summoned Xiantian immediately appeared behind him. Well, there was no need to even give the command. He immediately rushed into the attack. He then summoned the dragon turtle and asked it to use its provocation and asked the sunset dragon to deal with the small change. Yongyang's beasts immediately began to scatter their opponents throughout the cave, defeating them one after another. Suddenly Yan Yan didn't even understand what kind of animals his friends were. Zhaoing was amazed that Yongyang was able to lure all the monsters at once without having to hunt them down one by one. On top of that, he also had a high-ranking dragon that incinerated everything it saw. The turtle lured all the enemies and the dragon extinguished them with his flame. Xintian took on the heaviest ones and fought them alone. From the side, all that was visible were the swings of his axe. His battle axe glittered and reflected any rays from light sources. Only thanks to this could one understand where the summoned godlike beast was. It didn't take him very long to take down the elite spider. Yan Yan's friend stuttered and asked him if he had imagined everything that was happening. Zhaoing watched the fight and thought only about the fact that Yongyang was again ahead of her, and this really irritated her. Yan Niam confessed to the two of them what kind of beasts and what rank he had. His friend was even more surprised, so much so that his lower jaw dropped. Zhaoing was also very surprised and thought that this guy had obviously downloaded cheats for life in secret from everyone. It was really impossible. Suddenly Yana reminded that the mentors said that he had a useless beast mark, and then it was unclear how he managed to summon such powerful ones. Yana replied that if his sign was really useless, then their words would be true, however his sign was special. But it was not worth telling anyone about this. The friend promised that he would not tell anyone and swore on his right hand and his collection of magazines. Very quickly they dealt with the main crowd of spider monsters and moved on. But soon they encountered something that was not the worst thing that could await them in that cave. A huge warrior spider with a very toothy mouth was ready to pounce on them and tear them apart. This was not the toughest opponent in this dungeon, and Yongyang was not alone, but now there were three of them. Yongyang didn't even tense up when he saw such monsters. It didn't take him long to deal with this monster. The level 13 spider warrior was defeated and a spider dagger was also received. Every spider they encountered on their way died very quickly. The 10th level warrior regiment was dust compared to the previous ones. This went on for a very long time. Any spiders they encountered along the way quickly parted with their lives. Suddenly Yen replied that his beasts were so powerful that even the spiders had their eyes wide open in fear. Zhaoing finally leveled up to 10th. She jumped up and down with joy because now she could try to enter the Heavenly Dragon Academy. Yen chuckled and noted that the girl could at least say thank you to him. The girl smiled and asked him not to sulk, promising that she would feed him lunch sometime as a sign of gratitude. Having finished the cleanup, having raised their levels, they returned from the portal. Suddenly Yen exhaled heavily and stretched, noting that no one could have predicted that he would reach the 7th level, and perhaps when he returned even his father would call him Brother Lu. Yen thought to himself that he had only reached level 11, and as he had expected, after level 10 gaining experience was more difficult. Zhaoing said that she really didn't like being in debt and pulled Yongyang by the hand and suggested that they have a snack first. Yongyang was too caught up in his thoughts and flinched a little when the girl pulled him. Zhaoing turned to Lu Yang and warned him that he would not go with them. Lu Yang smiled and, noting that he understood everything, emphasized that he still did not want to be the third wheel on their date. Soon the exam time arrived and everyone gathered together to take the test. Zhaoing, who had reached the 10th level, was very confident in her abilities and confidently waited for the beginning. Her mentor was very happy with his student's achievement and smiled from ear to ear. He turned to Master Su and asked with a grin where his Yongyang was daring to go into the spider hole with his trash beast mark there. It was at this point in the conversation that Yongyang himself appeared and said that he was forced to disappoint his mentor. Zhang Guofu thought that the guy would not show up and was very surprised by his appearance. When he saw that the guy was already level 11, he was speechless. He shouted that this couldn't be and that such a fast leveling up with such a useless skill was impossible. He answered with a stern look that there was a way out of any situation and he found it. Yongyang apologized to his teacher for being late, explaining that he woke up late. Master Su assured him that it was nothing to worry about, he had been trying so hard over the past few days. Yanu thanked him and walked towards the arena. Mentor Su really liked the fact that Yongyang tried to be first again and again overtook Zhaoing, reaching level 11. He shouted at Zhang Guofu and asked if he had anything to say now. Here he only chuckled and turned away. Zhang Guofu walked away and shouted at the end that the exam would definitely show who was capable of what. The crowd screamed upon seeing the masters who were already approaching the testing site. Yen saw them for the first time and was surprised that they could fly, because only a stealer or level 80 after the 3rd evolution was capable of this. I hoped that someday I would reach a similar peak myself. The masters carefully descended into the arena in front of the entire crowd. One of the men greeted all the applicants present and said that he was an examiner named Mo Yen, and it was under his supervision that any fraud was punishable by expulsion. The applicants were a little tense, but overall everything was clear to everyone. The exam consisted of 3 stages. The first was a test of strength and spirit, and everyone would be moved to an individual space where 2 statues were installed for testing. Yan asked what the bonus would be if they managed to destroy both statues. Mr. Mo said that there was no need to worry about this since both statues had 90% immunity to physical and elemental damage, and at the level of applicants this was impossible. The gentleman waved his hand and declared the exam open. Soon it was the turn of Yongyang, who was indeed moved to a certain closed space. As soon as he appeared, he immediately began to look around. It still hasn't loaded completely, and it was worth waiting a little. 2 huge statues as tall as 10 ordinary people appeared before him. Yongyang has included an analysis to view the characteristics of these statues. They had protection against physical damage and elemental damage, which was really hard to defeat. And what Yong noted was that everything matched, as the examiner said they had high protection and health. He summoned Xiantian first. He ordered him to activate all his skills, attack with full force and show how strong he was. He used Blood Madness, which restored 10% of health from attack and dealt 1.5 times more damage and 20% to attack. The summoned beast screamed and beat its fist on its chest, showing that it was furious and very strong. He activated the last battle when he completely refused protection, but plus K 300% of the Order of Strength was added, which lasted for 5 minutes. Having activated all his effects, he rushed into battle against the statues. With just one hit, he was able to deal 60,000 damage to the statues. He jumped to the side, and having caught his breath a little, he pounced on them again. The next hit took away 80,000 health from the statue. Yongyang was shocked, but she expected that the ancient god of war would destroy so many health points in just 2 hits. Watching this fight, Yongyang decided that these golems won't last long. Xintian was acting with all his might. He was screaming and roaring, and all that was visible was his hammer sparkling somewhere on the sides. He didn't retreat for a single second, and it was clear that he could easily deal with these statues. He managed to do such incredible things that it was even scary to watch. This was his element and a worthy opponent. Suddenly it began to glow with a bright yellow light, that he was about to explode. But that was not the case. Yan received a notification that 2,000 points were received. One of the men approached Mr. Zhou and clarified that among all the applicants his daughter stood out, and in just a few days reached level 10, and was practically admitted to the Heavenly Dragon Academy. The gentleman asked not to exaggerate and noted that the guy who summoned 3 high-ranking beasts at once could rather be called a genius, but unfortunately it was not known what province he was from. Mr. Mo noted that the appearance of such a tamer was a true stroke of luck for the entire Dragon Empire. Well, their conversation was interrupted because a portal for the return of the applicant opened, which surprised them very much. Yongyang appeared from the portal, surprising everyone even more. Mr. Zhou looked at his watch and was even more surprised because only 5 minutes had passed. Mr. Mo asked to check the system logs in case a failure occurred. The assistant replied that he would check everything now. Yongyang turned to the examiner and stated that he had already completed the first part of the exam. Mr. Mo was very surprised and asked what exactly he meant by the title completed. Yana said that he destroyed both golems. One of the men shouted that it was impossible because the examination statues had 90% protection against physical and elemental damage, and he could definitely use the forbidden items. Yan stated that he had not violated anything and suggested that if they did not believe him, they should check the logs. The man started yelling at him for daring to order him around, and he had a lot of courage since he decided to cheat in front of Mr. Mo and started threatening him with expulsion. The assistant stood up and turned to Mr. Mo and replied that all the results of the inspection were ready. The gentleman asked what was there. The assistant said that according to the system data, Yongyang destroyed both statues in 4 minutes and 28 seconds and did not use any prohibited items. The examiners looked at each other, not believing what they heard. Mr. Mo was surprised that the guy needed so little time and assumed that a new genius had appeared in Jingling. Mr. Zhou approached Yongyang and asked if he was his daughter's classmate. He clarified that the girl had told him about him. And now it is clear that the young man was truly extraordinary, and it is not surprising that he constantly avoided her. The man who accused Yan in the car tried to convince him that the guy had behaved dishonestly and should have been expelled or at least checked more thoroughly. Yan stated that if there were doubts about him, they should have presented evidence, otherwise it was simply slander for which he himself could be deprived of the right to be an examiner. The man screamed but no longer knew what to answer this boy. Mr. Mo asked Wang Liang to just shut up and smiled. Mr. Mo stated that Yongyang's results had been officially recorded and accepted. Yongyang bowed his head and sincerely thanked the master. Wang Liang immediately harbored a grudge against this guy for daring to disgrace him like that and decided that he would definitely remember it. Next was Lu Yang along with his totem animal, the wolf. His wolf was really strong, but he couldn't do anything against such statues. The wolf was given the ability to deal 6,000 damage, but it was too little. Zhaoing, thanks to her phoenix, could deal around 12,000 damage to the statue. Soon it was time for the exam. All applicants were returned back to the arena. Everyone anxiously awaited their results and verdict. Mr. Mopa greeted everyone again and announced the results of the first part of the exam and began to list the results of each of the applicants, starting with the worst. Many people complained that the statues were too strong, and that was why they had such poor results. One of the girls, after the results were also quite bad, agreed with her classmate and noted that the statues were so strong that her animal even lost several teeth. Yen was still waiting for his results and carefully eavesdropped on his classmates. Finally, Mr. Mo announced the second place, which was taken by Zhaoing, who scored 1.322 points. One of the guys standing nearby commented that these were exactly the results expected from a real genius. Another classmate noted that the girl was as always on top. Zhaoing was glad that she managed to level up to level 10, which helped her deal enough damage and take second place. Well, then she thought that Yan's name had not yet been announced. She began to analyze that she took second place and he had 3 powerful beasts, and it could not be that he did not even get into the top 10. And at this point in her thoughts, Mr. Mo announced that first place went to Yongyang, who scored 2,000 points. All of Yongyang's classmates stared at him and immediately began to get indignant. Zhaoing was silent. Tears were flowing from her eyes. 2,000 points was the maximum score, and envy began to grow within her again. One of the applicants asked how this was possible, because in order to get the maximum it was necessary to completely destroy the statues. One of the other applicants reminded that Yongyang had a trash beast mark and he most likely cheated. Mr. Mo asked for silence. He explained that the commission had already checked everything and there were no violations. Yongyang had passed the test solely due to his own abilities. He didn't understand how he could get the maximum result with such a sign and doubted that the examiners calculated everything correctly. Some were envious and indignant, while others on the contrary were very upset by their poor results compared to Yongyang, who was considered a loser. Mr. Mo listened to the discussion of the applicants and thought that if they were told that Yongyang did this in just 4.5 minutes, they would definitely fall into despair. Then the gentleman announced that the next test was for endurance and agility. A lava beast would appear inside each personal space, and for every minute that the applicant could hold out against it, he would receive 20 points. The master could have ordered a new test to begin. Yen was extremely focused on the upcoming test because he also had to take first place and show the best results. Immediately, that same lava beast appeared in front of him. As always, Yen first analyzed his opponent. This monster completely ignored physical and elemental damage. On top of that, his damage increased by 5% every 5 minutes. He was an incredibly difficult opponent that Yongyang had never dealt with. Yen assumed that this lava beast was generally unkillable, and now it became clear to him why this was a test of endurance and agility. The lava beast immediately began to attack Yongyang. Yen clearly had to gather her strength and start dodging the attacks. The beast threw fireballs at its opponent. These fireballs exploded a few seconds after being thrown and dealt good damage. Yongyang did everything he could to avoid being attacked by any of this monster. It was very difficult, and he had a hard time dodging these balls. Jan thought that even though the lava beast didn't receive damage, since it had a health bar, it could still be killed. He guessed that Xintian had a 1.5% chance of instantly killing any monster whose level was less than 5 times higher than his own. The beast was level 15, which meant that it could work. Yongyang summoned Xiantian. I think he needed to at least try to kill the lava beast. Xintian immediately rushed to attack after appearing using all his skills. Soon the first blow was dealt to the monster. Everything around was caught in the fire. It seemed that this beast was about to explode and burn everything around. The beast continued to growl and attack. After this attack, another fireball immediately flew towards Yongyang. Yongyang tensed up that the lava and beast didn't even notice the Xintian strike. Next, Yang summoned the dragon turtle and asked it to provoke the lava beast. The turtle used its skill and began to provoke the beast to attack itself. Immediately, another fireball flew towards the turtle. Yongyang exhaled because now he was finally safe and the dragon turtle was taking all the damage. It was only 20 minutes into the test. Xintian was still trying to kill the lava beast and did not retreat. It was clear that the summoned beast was already quite tired and fed up with countless unsuccessful attempts. Yongyang turned to him and pointed out that he had been lucky before and why his skill hadn't worked yet, and pointed out that the dragon turtle was also at its limit. The lava beast meanwhile seemed completely unexhausted and continued to attack at the same pace. And he stopped throwing fireballs at the turtle who was about to surrender. As soon as the beast threw another ball, Xiantian rushed at it again. It seemed like he got a second wind and he ran towards the beast with renewed strength. He swung and hit with all the power he had. This next blow cut the lava beast in half. Finally worked. The system gave a notification that the lava beast was defeated. Yen smiled, happy that everything finally worked. The examiners were waiting for the applicants to appear. It was very quiet in the arena. Mr. Mo was lost in his thoughts and looked down at the floor. After some time, graduate students began to run away from the portal screaming for help and to be saved. They responded that this lava beast was indeed a very strong and very difficult opponent. Mr. Mo noted that less than 40 minutes had passed and the students were becoming weaker every year. Mr. Zhou noted that if we judge by the first test, then Yongyang could demonstrate something incredible here too. Wang Liang the echidna smiled and turned to Mr. Zhou and said that that boy was just lucky, and that the lava beast had absolute protection, and even if Yongyang was a genius, he couldn't cope with him. Mr. Zhou looked at Wang Liang with a smirk and emphasized that in his opinion Yongyang was quite capable of handling such an opponent. Wang Liang quickly reminded that the lava beast used lava wrath once an hour, which was a massive attack with 400% damage. And no one could withstand it. Wang Liang smiled and said that if Yongyang really did it, he would wash his head while standing on his hands and talk about his shiny bald head. After 1 hour and 5 minutes, other applicants began to appear and also gave up. The girl who came out of the portal noted that there was no way to dodge the last attack. The next of the guys was indignant that there was no place to hide and it was impossible. Zhaoing scolded herself because she didn't expect that he would be able to capture the entire territory at once with one skill. Mr. Mo noted that it looked like the test was over because everyone had come out and it was time to announce the results. The assistant shouted that it was worth waiting because the system showed another student who was taking the test. Mr. Mo was surprised and asked who it was. The assistant said it was participant number 69 Yongyang. The applicants were very surprised when they heard this name because in this case they were sure that they would not survive the attacks of the new beast. Mr. Mo smiled and said out loud that this guy was really interesting. The man in the center said that since there was still someone left, then they could wait a little longer. The young man standing next to him turned to Wang Liang and noted that it looked like it was time for him to fulfill his promise. The man, apparently Wang Liang, was clearly nervous, covered in sweat, and stuttering. He began to explain that it was all a joke and should not be taken seriously. The first man noted that he was the tamer and must keep his word and must start when Yongyang comes out. Wang Liang really liked this idea, but he didn't object. The timer will notify you that the countdown has ended. The group of men were very surprised that 2 hours had passed and that guy had gotten the max again. They doubted that it was not a bug and assumed that Yongyang had long since died in the clutches of the lava beast. The man noted that time was up and it was time to finish the tests. The guy behind him knew that the order would be carried out. A glow appeared in the middle of the field. Soon in this radiance there appeared a young man who was sprawled out on the grass and dozing. Very quickly the glow disappeared. The crowd that was discussing his death immediately removed their gaze from him. Someone was smiling and someone on the contrary was not entirely happy with what they saw. Wang Liang laughed loudly and pointed out that he had already mentioned Yongyang's dishonesty, who might have cheated. The man guessed that he probably used some kind of object to avoid the attacks. Another of the men turned to Yongyang with a displeased, rude tone and asked how much longer he was going to sleep. Yongyang sat up and yawned, surprised that the second test was already over. Wang Liang pointed his finger at him and emphasized that the guy had miscalculated the timing and got caught. Yen ruffled the hair on the back of his head and asked what exactly the man meant. Wang Liang asked him not to play the fool and explained that the lava beast was not his granny and why in that case it did not touch him and even let him sleep. Yongyang smiled and looked down at the floor and replied that she had killed this beast so she could rest. The guy immediately stood up and asked if there was any prohibition on sleeping during the test. Wang Liang turned to Mr. Mo and asked him if he heard what Yongyang was saying. He did not believe that the guy could kill a creature with complete invulnerability and considered his words to be complete nonsense. Yen said that he was too lazy to argue with everyone and prove anything and suggested simply checking the system data. Mr. Mo replied that they would do so and that his assistant would soon find out that he had heard the command. Wang Liang shouted at the young man that even if the data was checked, he would still be disqualified from the exams. One of the guys was very upset because Yongyang showed great promise. Very soon the assistant shouted that all the results were ready for viewing. Wang Liang shouted demandingly for the assistant to quickly tell whether Yongyang was cheating or not. The assistant said that at 25 minutes and 18 seconds, his beast activated a special skill and instantly destroyed the red beast. Mr. Mo, upon hearing that this had happened, was instantly shocked. The assistant clarified that no one had killed the new beast before, so the system did not provide for automatic teleportation after a period of time, and that is why the failure occurred. A crowd immediately gathered around Yongyang. Some shouted that their comrade was absolutely not human to be able to do such a thing. Some laughed that the others were sweating and fighting the beast, and Yongyang was sleeping in the middle of the exam. Yongyang turned to Mr. Mo and noted that he understood everything, was only a student and had no right to contradict the examiner. But Yen said that he was not going to put up with examiner Wang's baseless accusations. Wang Liang didn't even know how to react when he heard this. Mr. Mo turned to the guy with a guilty look and explained that they had made a mistake and asked him for forgiveness on behalf of all the examiners. Mr. Mo turned to Wang Liang and declared that he was depriving him of his status as an examiner and asked him to go and think about his behavior. The guards took Wang Liang's girlfriend and dragged him to the exit. He screamed and asked for forgiveness, clarifying that he had already realized his mistake. Mr. Mo ignored this and made a statement that Yongyang would receive the maximum points for the second test, and that the final stage of the exam would begin in 30 minutes, until which everyone could rest. One of the guys who also had to come to the exam called Yongyang a real monster, being shocked by this result. One of the girls thought that Yen was cool without envying him at all, but on the contrary almost falling in love with him. Mr. Mo thought to himself that it was probably because of one Yongyang that all the exam rules would have to be revised. But suddenly the thought came into his head that this guy, given his abilities, could be exactly the one they were looking for up there. Mr. Mo immediately shouted to his assistant to send the guy's information to the capital.